Hi, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Aleš Ernitzel. I'm Slovene philosopher, podcaster, ex-columnist, and a candidate for presidency of Slovenia 2022. To the right is a well-renowned, world-renowned podcaster from Romania, Alex Kaschuta. I hope I pronounced this well enough. Alex, thanks for accepting my invitation. It's a delight.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's
Introduce
excellent.
overall, please.
Yes, thank you for the kind introduction. World renowned in certain niche internet communities, I can imagine. But yeah,
Yeah.
definitely not very not a household name in any case. But yeah, I've been a journalist for quite a long time. I've been active in many sectors of the economy. I've worked in tech and finance as well. But I've been writing on the side in different anonymous blogs and anonymous forums for a very long time. So I'm well seasoned with online discourse. And then I think my kind of bigger breakthrough would be on Twitter. I mean, I found a home on Twitter, and that's kind of where I made my network and I've met more people. And I am now part of what is broadly termed the dissident right or the new right, and that's kind of what my podcast covers as well. The this kind of post liberal energy that is blossoming on the right. So that's kind of my shtick at the moment.
I read a couple of articles about you, and I watched some of your streams. So I do know something about you, and you also introduced yourself in this manner. What would you call a right wing? What would you call a right wing? And would you call yourself a right winger, or would you rather call yourself a seeking post liberal?
Oh, that's nice. I would probably call myself both. In any sense of the word, historically, I am a right winger. I don't feel any need to disavow the right wing, or I essentially subscribe to kind of the Curtis Yarvin perspective on the difference between left and right. There is a camp that favors entropy, and there is a camp that favors fighting entropy. And I am in the camp that favors fighting entropy. I'm on the side of order. Um, does there exist? Does fallout from order exist? Are there negative sides to order? Of course, there are many negative sides to order, but I feel like the negative sides to chaos. Counter, are very present at the moment, and require a countervailing force of at least equal and opposite power. So that's why, for the time being, in this historical context, I'm very much of the right wing.
Yeah, I asked you that because of my own personal situation. I belong to the niche in Slovenia that calls itself a sovereignist or nationalist, or ethno nationalist, better to say, to articulate it better. And we've been promoting this idea for quite a time now, that a sovereignist, an ethno nationalist, is neither a right winger, neither nor a left winger, because if you're pro your ethnos, or pro the survival of your ethnos or your nation or your tribe, then you have to choose your ideologies and political policies rationally and pragmatically and empirically. By that, I mean that you cannot a priori favorize neither capitalism, or better say free markets, nor socialism, whatever that is, whatever the brand the left promote, the mainstream left promotes now. um, and Of course, we all come from the so-called right wing. We were once we We were a part of the greatest mainstream Slovene center right party, but they seemingly betrayed the Slovene people, and we cannot anymore identify with this party nor with this ideology, but because it seems to me that this idea, the right wing ideology lately, it comes from America to Europe to Romania to Slovenia. We were it hasn't been so long ago that we were so far away from everything important that happened in the Western world, and now we all have these same floscules, these same excerpts from talking points of Republicans that we promulgate, and we call ourselves right wing, and the right wing is nothing else but the 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 party of free marketeers or entrepreneurs or even big corporations, although they all say, as libertarians say, that this is not true. Free markets, if a if you become a multinational corporation, this is it had to there had to be some crony capitalism during the path to the success. What's your opinion on this? Sorry for being
Yeah.
so long.
No, no, I see what you're saying. I mean, there's a lot of fights about definitions in all of these circles. You know, what is the right wing? I feel like a lot of people have settled on the right wing as just being kind of this very basic first principles approach. Which essentially aligns with order. There's nothing much beyond that. If you look at it in the Republican sense, yeah, that's essentially fusionism. That's what has been considered right wing in the last, since Reagan. Like this is, free markets and fiscally conservative, socially do whatever you want. Try to keep the government out of our pants, keep the government out of everything, and that's essentially been a lubricant for the left. Just the idea that you're going to socially liberate all of these spaces, keep the government out of all of these spaces, has just meant that the libertarians have just been tearing down traditional institutions like like marriage, like things that were load bearing pillars of society, like very important things that you just didn't understand why they were important until you tore them down. And then surprise surprise, what happened? The state had to step in to save people from all of this great liberation, all of this social liberation that was facilitated by the libertarian arm of fusionism. So, and on the other side, what you had is, free markets. I mean, what does free markets in this case entail? In one way, I understand that the libertarians have a point. These markets aren't free because they're heavily regulated, but at the same time, there is a certain momentum in scale that is very hard to beat when you're a small company. So essentially, the reality is that having a bigger government that's been enabled by all of this, like I said, libertarianism, very friendly libertarianism to big government, has also meant that you have a big government there to provide all of the regulation that will be very easy to abide by the big corporations if they're not the ones actually setting this regulation up by lobbying, and absolutely impossible to abide by the smaller companies that would be the so-called actual free markets, as the libertarians say. So yes, I understand that this stuff has been considered right wing, and I don't associate with that. But in the spirit of kind of redux and reducing everything to first principles, I think just basically the allegiance to order and not just like pure decay that we see in mainstream left ideology and kind of the thing that we're all fighting. Yeah, so I don't know if that was very clear, but yeah, I mean it's hard to pledge
Yeah.
allegiance to anything nowadays.
The only problem I have with this answer is that it sounds universalistic, and I don't have faith in universalism in the sense I don't have faith in humanism. We
Yeah.
don't play by the same rules, we humans. We play by the different rules according to the tribes we are a part of, or at least communities we're a part of. Even the greatest individualists nowadays, they teach youth to make allegiance, to make communities, to work in groups, although they don't mention ethnicities or traditional
Yeah, no, I
groups as
understand. I
ethnicities.
will disavow the universalism for sure. I mean, that's I think that's a subordinate category to order as well. I mean, it's um, there is a certain order in. I mean, all of the words associated with in group preference are stigmatized. Like I wanted to say, tribalism. You know, tribalism is seen as a very bad thing. I think it is a natural thing. It ties to order. It ties to a certain hierarchy that just exists in nature. I mean, every word that's going to come out of my mouth was going to have some sort of negative connotation, but it's like in-group preference, tribalism, cronyism, nepotism, all of these things. Just the idea that you might accord preference to someone who is in your inner circle or in your family or in your tribe or your kin, is seen as a very negative thing. But I think these are all essentially subcategories of order. So yeah, I think I'm on the same wavelength as you are in terms of that.
Uh, what do you think about religion, specifically about Christianity? The majority of Romanian people are Orthodox. The majority of, or at least traditionally, Slovenes have been Catholic. Although there's a big difference nowadays between traditional Catholics and normie Catholics, modernized Catholics. There are big fights in Slovenia between them, ideologically, philosophically, and so forth. And there are also big fights in Slovenia, and also seeing the international alt right or dissident right communities between neo pagans, or at least anti Christian right wingers or alternative right wingers, and Christian, pro Christian right wingers. And although I consider myself a Catholic, I do admit that neo pagan critics of Christianity, at least mainstream Christianity, do have a good point by saying that it Christianity messes up with the discourse in the sense that it purports universalism in the same sense that globalists purport that the universalism through humanism, in the sense we're all humans, God likes us all, and so forth and so forth. Uh, would you say that Christianity can be a discursive problem, at least?
Yeah, I agree with the criticism from the neo pagans. Though I kind of, the parenthesis here is that it does feel to me that the neo pagans have only criticism. I have yet to see a positive, the idea that the pagans do worship, but what exactly do they worship? Do they worship pagan gods? Do they have a positive vision for what it is to worship? I believe that something will have to be worshipped. What exactly is, like, there, Mencius Moba comes up with this concept of vitalism. To me, it feels very bare bones. It's not a god. It's kind of like this fuzzy, thing that would be kind of like a minimum viable religion for many people. But it just doesn't feel. I feel like the concreteness in this space is the thing that will save us, in the sense that, okay, if there is something admirable, a vitalist, wonderful to worship, then they better pony up. They better tell us what it is. On the other hand, you have the Christians, in which this universalism critique, I think, is spot on as well, because it almost um, it's essentially leftism in many ways. I have to say, it's just the idea that okay, it's civic nationalism under a different umbrella, under a different philosophy. The idea that the only thing you need to ascribe to is Christianity or whatever, Catholicism. If you look at the integralists, and you just sign here under the dotted line, and you're welcomed into the great family. I mean, the most some of the minorities, and especially in the US and all of these communities, they're more religious than the mainstream population. I mean, especially people from South America. There's it really does not solve that problem in the sense that UK, it's civic nationalism. I mean, you would have to align with the more Catholic people from Guatemala if that's the case. So I think this is very good criticism. I think academic agent had recently a very good article on exactly this criticism, and I think he thinks this is important as well. I think he's not exactly a religious man, so obviously there are different perspectives here. I think the distributist has a different perspective on this, which I think is also very good. Yeah, I think these are two people covering the space very well, and they're very deep in these arguments. And if you want um, an analysis of this, these two guys cover it probably much better than I could. But just in my perspective, that's pretty much the key problem of integralism. The idea that um, if you worship Catholicism first, then that has that universal component. If you take it as an kind of unreformed Catholicism as is, as the Church of Rome preaches, as if it's under the Pope, then this is what you get. If you want some sort of orthodox, new improved Catholicism with I don't know, tribalist undertones, that might exist, but it's not what we
Yeah,
have right now.
yeah, I agree. You cannot criticize the modernism in Catholic Church and still say that it'll all be okay if only we get people to come to Catholic Church. It's not that simple. Although a component of Catholic Church, sociological component, psychological component of Catholic Church and its tradition is important, could be important, but it's not that simple. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean
I would like to
the
ask you. It would be
yeah.
interesting to hear, for me at least. Uh, yeah, go
No,
on.
no, I just wanted to yeah, I mean just continue because I lost my train of thought. So you continue, sorry.
No problem. No problem. If you remember something later on, you just say it. It would be interesting for me to hear Romanian perspective towards EU. Uh, what is presented from the mainstream media to Romanians? What is a core? What are the core nations or core states to us Slovenians? The core states, the states that are presented as the core states of the EU, are Germany, Austria, and France. And what is sold to you Romanians as a Romanian right wing?
Yeah, it's a Romanian right wing perspective. Yeah, I mean the I mean for us as well, Germany is the EU, and then whatever culturally similar, France, very secondary, but Germany is kind of the core of the EU. The EU is still seen as kind of this beacon of the future. We still kind of have, at in large part, the same idea that we had when we joined the EU, that this is going to be a way for us to align to the standards of Europe in economic terms and cultural terms. And a miracle, and it's great. The reality is that we weren't qualified to enter under the standards that the EU set. We got in by compromising a lot on many things. Like we promised many things to the EU that Romania wasn't really able to do in terms of extremely stringent regulations on what companies could do. Essentially we became an open market for EU companies. That's what we joined as, because we didn't join as an equal member. So the idea was that, okay, EU companies would have free access to labor, free access to the people, buying power here, remittances from people working in free labor in the EU, which has all happened that way, and it's been a source of prosperity for many people, also the immigrants and also the companies, and also that they wouldn't have much competition from companies in Romania, because all of the regulations that the EU put on companies in Romania were absolutely impossible for a developing country to abide by. So most companies working here were pretty much crushed by it. So that's essentially what happened to us. What was promised was also a lot of structural funds, which happened partly. Some of them got diverted, obviously, by usual corruption, but a lot of structural funds came through, and a lot of things were built with EU funds. So that happened. Yeah. So essentially, the relationship that we have right now with the EU is one of of still hoping, but a lot of dreams were kind of dashed because we are not aligned with the EU in any way at this point. We're still kind of developing in many ways. And in terms of the right wing vision, there are some growing movements with a kind of nationalist Christian tint to them, but they're not at the level where they'd be competition for the EU aligned neoliberal parties. That's my feeling.
Our take, by our, I mean Slovene sovereignists and nationalists, is that Slovenia has about 2.1 million inhabitants. It's possible that Slovenes are 1.7, although I'm doubtful about that, because since 2001 Slovenes haven't been able, we weren't allowed to count ourselves, for example, so we don't actually know how many Slovenes live in Slovenia nowadays, and the center right party doesn't help with it, and not only not helping with it, it statistics shows that whenever we have center right government, many the majority of Kosovo Albanians and Bosniaks as immigrants come to Slovenia, and we know that they have better demographics as Slovenes. Slovenes have 1 point something children, for example, and if you extrapolate from these statistics, it's pretty sure that we're going to be a minority in our own country, and probably even extinct in a couple of decades, if not even sooner. So it's pretty obvious that Slovenia, for Slovenes, has no other alternatives as playing a card of ethno nationalism, for example. But none of the mainstream parties do that. None of the mainstream media promote that. None of the mainstream politicians promote that. How's how's neoliberalistic model for Romania working for Romanians as people? Is there any ethnocide going on in Romania also?
I mean, less so. I think it's also because just as a destination for immigrants, it's less interesting as Slovenia, and just in terms of the proximity to Western Europe, and just the level of development is not as high. The the issue that we have is just like emigration is extremely high, and we have almost close to 2 fertility. I think it's 1.89 or something. But I think it's also propped up a lot by I think our Roma population, which is extremely well padded demographically. So I wouldn't I wouldn't know exactly what the for yeah for ethnic Romanians what it is. But yeah, it's better than most of Europe, better than Hungary, better than pretty much any country around us. So that's a good thing. But the problem is our country is emptying of people just because they're all moving to Western Europe. So that was, that was one of the big promises of the EU, freedom of movement. And a lot of our economy is based on remittances. It's essentially kind of the Mexico of Western Europe. Just a lot of it is people sending money back and building houses and stuff for their family while they work somewhere in Western Europe, or maybe engage in low level criminality or whatever. But yeah, it's just the way it is. So we're not doing great demographically, and it's very hard to see what the tax base is going to look like in the future years. I mean, obviously, if Western Europe doesn't decline to a point where all the Romanians will move back, which I've moved back. Obviously, I'm a bit of a canary in the coal mine because I look at these things all day and I obsess over them. But some people might have the same idea very soon, and hopefully, being some of the most fertile people in West in Eastern Europe, they might come
Yeah.
back and do the deed here and have children, and hopefully we're not going to have any issues of that. But yeah, I mean, every trend you see in the West, and every trend you see coming from America, because people ask me like, why are you so interested in U.S. politics? It's coming to us. I mean, I just see it in the water in my generation. This is what people think about. They think about US cultural trends. They mold themselves according to US elites. This is what is coming down the pipe through social media. These are the values that they align with. Um, and it's important. It really is. I mean, in my generation, I'm kind of from middle to upper class Romanians, which doesn't mean much in Western European context. It's just the people that maybe went abroad to go to college, or they work for multinationals, or are lawyers or doctors or something like that. Almost no one from my generation, my age, and I'm 30 something, have children or interested in doing things like that. It's very strange. Like, the more aligned you are with kind of high class European culture, the less the less fertile you are, the less you want to get involved in the propagation of the species and basic things like this, having a family. So I don't know. To me, it feels like a harbinger of something sinister.
Is there something considered an average Romanian ethnic Romanian as it is in Slovenia? Because in Slovenia we have all these problems. Like we don't have enough children. We have too many immigrants from ex-Yugoslavia and Kosovo, Albania. So we are dying out, and the immigrants are having um, much more children than we do. They are mostly integrable or assimilable, and everything shows that Slovenia as a nation state is dying out. Is there something like that similar in Romania? And what is considered an ethnic Romanian? You mentioned gypsies before. Do you have any such problems as to in relations to other ethnicities that live in Romania? For example, as you said, gypsies and so forth.
I mean, we used to have a much more, tense relationship before the European Union opened. We used to have the biggest population of, gypsies, so-called Roma, in Romania, in the whole EU. I think that those tensions kind of alleviated a little bit because a lot of the Roma population decided to move abroad. So, for various reasons. Now, not so much of a problem. We have a lot of ethnicities in Romania, but they've been here for a very long time. So we haven't had a lot of recent movements. We do have Ukrainian refugees at the moment, And there are a lot of kind of state subsidies for renting to them, employing. There's a whole kind of microeconomy for helping Ukrainian refugees, which I think is fair enough. I think those people are in need. They need our help. Government money's gone on much worse causes in Romania, so it's fine. But outside of that, we haven't really had many massive movements of people. There are a lot of programs now bringing in kind of laborers from like East Asia and things. So you see occasionally people from, I don't know, Cambodia, or I know Vietnam, or people coming here, and they work in cafes, or they work in like light labor or something like that. But I think these are just like I don't know, temporary workers, and they just want to work here for a set time, and then they go back home. Obviously, this is what was sold to the Germans with Turkish guest workers, but for some reason I think Romania is not necessarily their final destination, at least for now. So I am hopeful that this is all very, very temporary, and it's just actually, fixed time for labor. And yeah, our demographics aren't going to change with Southeast Asians very soon. But yeah, I think Romania is a strange case with that, just because we have a lot of Hungarians here. Like where I live, Transylvania, pretty much like 40-50% Hungarians. A lot of people don't even speak Romanian. Are there tensions? A little bit, but this is like these people have been here for hundreds of years. There are villages that are just Hungarian villages. People just know that people there speak Hungarian. It's very integrated in that sense, where we live and let live, because we've been living and letting live for hundreds of years. I myself come from a German village. My father was German, my mother was like Polish, Czech. So I feel like Romania is kind of this land between the empires. It's kind of like a fault line where there's just been so much. The Austro-Hungarians brought in people from all over the empire here to act as, you know, like I said, there have been tensions between these groups, but they're just like historical at this point. So there's not really, no active fires. But as I said, this is very different to your case, where there is very active current immigration of people who don't necessarily integrate.
Yeah, I have to tell you this anecdote. It's about us and Italians. There's a town called Gorizia, or Nova Gorizia, or Gorizia in Italian. They border to each other, but the border's free passable. It's freedom nowadays, and you have this ideological roller coaster where you can go to Italian Gorizia or to Slovene Nova Gorica, and you can choose to which global homo version of truth you would like to submit. Uh, you you have you have these two narratives. Um, if you're in Italy, if you're a Slovene in Italy, you have this you promote this narrative that fascists are endangering Slovenes in Italy because of the boomer World War II propaganda. And on the other side, you become a fascist as soon as you come to Slovenia if you want to preserve Slovenes in Slovenia. So, this is a really interesting situation we have on the border with Italy. Anything similar in Romania?
Less so. I just think that Romania, as it stands for now, is just not contested territory. We don't border any of the major countries of Europe. I mean, if we had a border with Italy, I can imagine there might be some issues. But for now, we have this nice fascist damper between us and the rest of Europe. It's called Hungary, one big slice of fascism, and they get all the heat, and we're just insulated from the fascism just by having the the special European, like Hungarian border. Yeah, I mean, at the moment we have the border with Ukraine, which is the bigger problem, and yeah, that's kind of where our immigration's coming from. But for now, that hasn't really been a problem. It's still everything's kind of in emergency mode, and also the Ukrainians don't want to stay in Romania. I mean, Ukraine and Romania rhyme a little bit too much for their tastes, so they want to move west if they can. If not, they want to go back to Ukraine. So yeah, it's good in a way to be a little bit more developing than Slovenia.
I don't want to play dumb, but I'll go straight forward with this. I mean, no, I lost my thought. Just a minute, just a second, actually. Um, yeah, the mainstream culture in Slovenia is Yugophilia, nostalgia over ex common country called Yugoslavia, combined with globalism. For native Slovene, they allow this archaic playing of actually Czech polka or something like that. What's the mainstream of Romania, and is the so-called state culture also a thing there?
I think that for people a bit older, there's definitely a lot of kind of communist nostalgia, because what used to have here is I mean, I won't call it national socialism, but communist nationalism is what it was, and there was kind of a big nationalist streak during Romanian communism, and kind of a pride of place and flag and kin, and yeah, people just kind of they are nostalgic for that period, in a way, the older generation. But now, I mean, the mainstream culture here is just it is kind of universalist, it essentially is boomer truth, like you alluded to before. It's the idea that the future is more openness, more, unification with the world, more progress, technological progress, social progress. Gay rights is good, and you're backward for doubting it. All of these things are seen as there's a certain direction to history, and we're on it. And if you're trying to backpedal, you're a bad guy. I mean, that's mainstream culture. It's obviously downstream from what's going on in the West, but I don't see like a big backlash, except for there is, like I said, there's a big kind of Orthodox Christian pushback through political means, through Christian means. There's a huge like March for Life and things like that, but it is essentially just people who are very committed to Orthodoxy, and there are fewer and fewer people that are committed to Orthodoxy. So the trend towards secularization is big here as well. So I don't know if that trend's going to reverse, if it stalls, what the future is going to look like. But yeah, we're definitely, that's why I'm interested in this stuff. We're definitely on the same tracks. Maybe it's happening a bit slower here, but not much.
What's the perspective of raising a child in Romania through the perspective of feminization, bureaucratization of schooling, mixing with foreigners, and feminization of nurture, or raising children through the state education system?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same worries that I'd have everywhere else. I mean, my husband's from New Zealand, and I feel like New Zealand's a bit worse in those respects. I mean, I'm not saying that Romanian state education is wonderful and it's better than New Zealand, but in the particular aspects that you highlighted, I think New Zealand's probably more advanced. Um, I mean, my view of this is that my son's going to have a combination of homeschooling and some form of private education that we can source in ways that is at least relatively aligned with our values. And this means like confessional schools, I mean Catholic school, or maybe something that is I mean, there's a pretty decent military school in Romania, which is quite disciplined, and things of that nature, things that align with an external order that doesn't necessarily have to be Catholic. I mean, if we find a really good Catholic school, my husband went to a boys' school in New Zealand, which was confessional. I think it was Anglican, but it was quite strict and just essentially a school. Like we used to have schools like this. Now they're only confessional schools are like that. So, I mean, a combination, like I said, a combination of homeschooling and religious education. I don't really see any other solution to this problem, and probably sex segregated education if we can find that, which is something you don't have in Romania. So it's probably going to be in New Zealand.
Uh, can there be Ukraine crisis? Can there be a supranational alternative right, or is this a unsolvable paradox? By which I mean, aren't we building a just another globalistic model when we alternative right wingers from all the different ethnicities in Europe and all over the world are trying to make a coalition of some sort? Should a alternative right be fragmented fragmented to national units, and if how would a based EU look like?
Yeah, I mean, you would have to, what's like a subsidiarity? What is that one of the principles of the EU? That's kind of the one of the principles that they do not hold to at all. And a based EU would have to essentially work under the principle of subsidiarity. At the moment, we're fighting a common enemy. I mean, we're fighting the EU and whatever kraken that it represents, and it will require forces. It would require an alliance of forces, intellectual, financial, strategic, tactical, on all these levels. I think it's a good time to have this creative outburst of just of thinking and strategy and direction. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we can learn from people in South Africa. I mean, does what does what do these coalitions mean? At the moment, it's just information exchange. Like I understand what they did in Iranians in South Africa and how they did that, and how they are organized. I don't know, territorial rights, water rights, things like that, that are essentially, if you want to build like an enclave like that on your own territory, for example, like a Slovenian Orania or something like that, you can very well learn from the strategies that they employed in South Africa. But you don't really have any sort of other I mean, you have friends in South Africa. You talk to them. You have podcasts. You just disseminate information, but you're not part of like a legislative body. You're not imposing laws on your friends in South Africa. You're not saying, oh no, no, the based council said, no masturbation on Tuesdays and stuff like that. There's no stuff like that you're going to be telling them. They organize their own things under the principle of based subsidiarity that we will stick to, or whatever. I mean, I feel like this we're just so far from the coercive power of any sort of EU. We're just a very loose association of shit posters and podcasters and politicians as well. But essentially, the only thing that they take from the space is the values which they impose on their level of abstraction, if they can.
Yep. What's with the values in Romania? We have this boomer myth of year zero, the year zero being 45.
Of course.
So after World War II consensus on morality, the source of all morality that is allowed nowadays. Do you have what is the role of this? Do you have something like that in Romania, and what is the role of it in public discourse?
Yeah, I mean, we have a few of these years, depending on who you ask. I mean, obviously, the Second World War is extremely big for us as well because we subscribe to essentially kind of a flavor, a sub flavor of the same myths that we have in Western Europe. Just because this this is all cultural programming. We watch the same movies as everyone in Western Europe. We watch the same stuff. We kind of think the same way, but we have our own little year zeros. I mean, there are kind of atrocities of communism that are seen as year zero as well, which also make people careful about communist nostalgia. I mean, we had the kind of Siget prison experiments, if you've are familiar with those. We had some crazy things happen in Romania. There's also kind of the interwar regime of, I mean, we call him fascist now, but he wasn't necessarily strictly a fascist because that was very limited phenomenon. I mean, Ion Antonescu was like a kind of a semi-fascist for very short-term guy, and he was allied with the Nazis, and that there were some happenings under him as well that are seen in a very negative light. But that's also downstream from more larger boomer truth that's coming from Europe. I mean, if we didn't have boomer truth coming from Europe, we would probably have a more reasonable understanding of the Antonescu regime and legionnaires and all these type of things that happened during the kind of interwar period and after the Second World War. So yeah, I mean, it's quite similar, I would say, to what you know from Western Europe. There's no very particular quirk. It's just that a lot of people still, they're not necessarily positively inclined towards communism either. At least the type of communism that we've had.
We have this situation in Slovenia that you have this critiques of communism or ex-communism from Yugoslavia, which was probably not so bad as in Romania. Probably, I don't know. I'm not sure. You can tell me. Nevertheless, these critiques of communism um, all don't say anything or even attack you when when you're trying to critique their critiquers. For example, you have this Slovene weird so-called self-pronounced psychoanalyst, Freudian psychoanalyst, who says to a historian that's trying to dig the bones of the people that got killed post-war World War II in Slovenia. Thousands of people that were killed by communists or Bolsheviks or whatever you call them. And please do tell me if this is too shaky of a ground for you, although
No,
it's
this is
on my
Zizek.
channel. Uh, no, but it's not Zizek. It's someone that's less mainstream. But he says to this man that's trying to dig these bones that he calls him a necrophiliac. He,
Mm.
he insults him, and then you say to this guy, "Okay, this guy is a necrophiliac, but isn't there something similar to the Jews when they cry about Holocaust? Why are you not criticizing them? Why do you post I don't know, threats where you seemingly empathize with Jews, but not empathize with seemingly your own people that got killed by communists, for example? Do you
Of
have
course.
anything like that in Romania?
Um, I mean, less so. I mean, there were some obviously people killed by communism, like persecuted by communists and put in camps, and that's definitely something that happened. I don't think there have been quite as much of a reckoning as in other parts, less so. But I think the main idea is that liberalism, the system that we subscribe to as well, sees communism as directionally correct. So it will not penalize the victims of like the victims of communists, because they're essentially collateral damage on on a positive direction. They were essentially, they see them as well intentioned, but their aims were too extreme, their methods were too rapid. The way they tried to impose the future was too overwhelming, and it didn't work just because they just tactically they did it wrong. And essentially that's kind of the instinct that liberals have towards communism. So every sort of victim of kind of the imposition of order. Like you have, Franco Spain and Salazar and all these type of things that keep being dragged out of history and seen as almost akin to Hitler. Obviously, like you said, Hitler's also another big example of these. Is an atrocity because it's counter to the right direction of history. Communism, obviously, is collateral damage on the path to the good times. But yeah, I mean, to answer your question, less so in Romania. We don't really have like a mass graves type situation that we need to reckon for or something like that, or at least there's not been anything in the news recently.
What would be your proposal for how to return to tradition without going path of anti-civilization, without cutting the internet cables and setting telephones on fire and so forth? How do you
Yeah.
yeah, there you go.
No, I think this is the question, or one of the questions that people on our side need to answer. I don't necessarily think it's possible to return to tradition, strictly just say, okay, we're just going to pick a year from the past and just, reconstruct the conditions, because all of those conditions were downstream of previous conditions, and there were historical technological conditions that led to that point. I mean, people call it a LARP, but it's just not even a LARP. It's just it is impossible to reconstruct. So essentially, what I think our movements need to do is to decide and coalesce around an external fixed values hierarchy that is non-negotiable, that is the thing that we worship, and that is the glue that ties us all together. I mean, the pagans would say it's neo-paganism, whatever that means. Like I said, it's very fuzzy and everyone means something else. The Christians, in a way, are much more high resolution because what does it mean to be Christian Orthodox? Well, I have this book here. This is exactly what it means to be Christian Orthodox, or, Catholic or something. We have this external framework, and we will subject ourselves to this external framework. Could there be, like Curtis Yarvin presents, like a minimum viable religion or a minimum viable standard that a new right wing could ally around? I think that might be the case. I don't think it's ever worked historically, or it hasn't really been tried recently. But then again, we have a technology that allows us to coordinate in different ways that just have not been the case before. Like the fact that we're having this podcast, we're coordinating in a way I couldn't even have known about you, 50 years ago. You would have been, doing your dissident work, in Slovenia alone with your friends or people that you know directly through samizdat and things like that. Now we know of each other, we can share information, coordinate on this level. So I think technology obviously is, I talk about this all the time. It's a huge threat. It has in itself an internal logic that's also quite toxic and corrosive, but at the same time, it can present opportunities that we didn't have in the past. So what this is going to look like, I'm not sure. But one thing I'm certain of is that without that external, non negotiable, fixed standard that is transcendent, and it's not just something that we haggle over coffee, we're not going to be able to coordinate. We're not going to be able to move ahead.
One of the last questions. What's your opinion, if you have one, on Meloni?
Mm.
Um, Obviously, you don't consider her a neo-fascist. Probably you don't. I
No,
speculate you
no.
don't, as the left wingers do. But what's your opinion? I saw many data on her. It's really messy. On one hand, you see her purporting the Green Pass. On the other hand, denying the same thing. It's almost as if they have politicians as these bots, and they're filming mm, two or three different information for the peasants with them. It's almost like that, and it's hard to create a clear vision of her. Do you have one, perhaps?
I mean, as long as Italy is part of the EU, it's, it's almost inevitably going to be some form of controlled opposition. Is, I mean, Italy is not a sovereign country at this point, and if the second thing she doesn't do is like push for Ital exit, or whatever it is, it's going to be very hard for her to make any significant change. I mean, they don't even have their own currency. Like, how are you going to do this? There's a lot of talk. There's a lot of powerful rhetoric. I love it. I mean, yeah, family, faith, tradition sounds awesome. I'm all on board. But at the same time, it's also a sponge for a lot of energy that people want to have out. Yes, exactly. This is what we want, but like in the case of Trump, he was a great sponge for a huge energy that was coming out of the population, but his hands were tied. So I don't know if her hands are tied just because of the situation that her country is in, that her hands are structurally tied by all the allegiances that Italy has to the EU, to just the way their legal, how much power does the president even have. There's huge pushback to her ideas, how much of them will actually be she'll be able to turn into reality. What practical steps is she actually taking, because this stuff is hard, and everything around you is pushing against it. um, that's the question. So I'm going to be, taking a page from the Bible and say that we shall know them by their fruits, and we'll have to wait and see what fruits will come of this. Because for now, it's all great, great stories, and I love it. She's a great rhetorician. I love the hand gesture; is very reminiscent of of the past. Like she's good at this. She's she's learned from the best. But yeah, I mean, we'll just have to see where this goes. I don't know. I'm very tentatively pro Maloney at the moment.
One last question, because you mentioned it, and I haven't read about it yet. Moldbach's concept of minimally viable religion. I think you put
Yeah,
it like
I
that.
think
What
I
is it
call
all?
it
What is it
that.
all about? Uh,
Yeah,
how
so
is
he
it
has a
different, for example, from philosophical theism or deism or something like that?
I no, obviously I'm not mold, but I can't expound on that. And I just call it a minimum viable religion because that sounds like what he's proposing. He has this essay called Principles of the Deep Right. The Deep Right is what he's trying to kind of rebrand this whole, big tent dissident right as. And he has five principles, and I think it's realism, vitalism. I think vitalism is essentially kind of the religious end, and the vitalism part is essentially believing in nature, order, hierarchy type things. But at the same time, this is all very fuzzy. Like I said, this is minimum viable religion, because he has this concept that the purple Caesar will come, and he will essentially put an end to the culture wars. This is almost like prophecy, but this is kind of like the ideal case of what's going to
Yeah.
happen. And what purple Caesar has to do is to cut the Gordian knot of the culture wars, and essentially accommodate all of these factions that live in peace under a regime that respects these very basic principles of the deep right, of which one is this vitalism, which I've called the minimum viable religion, which is kind of religious in nature. And a lot of religions have these ideas of hierarchy, order, limited, just kind of limited resistance. David, yes, Moldbug is a small hat, but to be honest, who isn't? So, yeah, I mean, it's that's kind of his vision. So, um, and it's a vision that some other people have as well. I think I don't know if you're familiar with the Charles Haywood at the Worthy House. He has his kind of system as well that he's developed. It's kind of foundationalism, and that also has religion as one of its core components. But there's no like state imposed religion, so it's still kind of it's nothing's pushed from the religious angle. It's like still pretty, it's a big tent of religion. you can't not be religious in a way, or you can't have polytheistic religions. I think that's the case with foundationalism. So it's all
Yeah,
of these perspectives are a kind of pluralism light, you know.
yeah, but there's all these problems with it. For example, what's a religion without confession? And on the other side, it doesn't escape the problems with universalism. Christianity also shows, although it's not the whole Christianity, and it's a couple of sects of Christianity that are mostly promoted nowadays, and so forth and so forth. And there's always this problem with whom do you love more, God or your nation?
Yeah.
For example,
Yeah.
what
I
if
think,
the truth is against your nation? What if the
yeah, no, I think this is an extremely important question
I,
for
I don't
people on
think
the
that
right.
I don't think that the pagans, yeah, I also do. I'm a Catholic. Also a philosophical theist and so forth, and I consider metaphysics to be the most important thing. And neo pagans, they don't bring any solutions. They have this Nietzscheanic attitude toward metaphysics that is self-refutable, but they do have point. They do have a good point that we have to solve this problem with at least prima facie problem with God and your tribe or your nation or something like that.
Yeah, I think, their criticism is good. Their solutions are non-existent. I think this is essentially a challenge posed to Christianity from a position from nowhere. It's like, how about this? But when you turn to see what exactly it is they're proposing, it's, I don't know, piracy on the high sea. I don't know, a life of rape and pillage.
Yeah,
Not.
it's no solution. If they our predecessors before the Jews came did something that was better than the Christians do nowadays, that's no solution. That's really no solution.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, maybe I don't
okay,
know the extent of their criticism, but
uh,
yeah, that's it.
Alex. Once again, thank you. It was a delight for me. It was. I believe that it was a delight for my audience, for your audience. Thank you for accepting my invitation once again. I hope I can invite you some other time. Any last
Absolutely.
thoughts?
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. I mean, it sounds like you've got your work cut out for you in Slovenia. It's an interesting place to be in, and I wish you the best of luck with your candidacy, and very much luck in the coming election.
Thank you very much. I probably already lost, and I wanted to ask you a much more trivial question about Andrew Tate, since you're both Romanians. But I'm. Can I do that? Do you have any
Sure, sure.
opinion
Ask me. Ask me.
on? Yeah, I will. I will. We still have time. Andrew Tate is also Romanian.
Kind of,
What's your
kind of. He
opinion?
lives in Romania. Um, I I like many of Andrew Tate's opinions. I think he is correct on many things. I think it's a bit tougher to endorse the way he lives. I think he's almost kind of like someone who's taken the neo pagans at their word and lives in a pretty much neo pagan nihilistic Übermensch type type of way. He's
Although in his defense,
Yeah,
he
defend
gives the
him.
money to the Orthodox Church. He gives the money to the Orthodox Church, and he goes to the mass. And yeah, that's about
Yeah,
it.
the
That's my
money from
defense.
cam girls goes I mean, it's probably not the worst place to send your
Yeah,
money if you're camming. Yeah, I mean, He's an enigma wrapped in a paradox wrapped in another enigma. No, I understand. He's through his work he does expose a lot of kind of modern contradictions and a lot of issues. I don't know what to say about his legal problems as well. I don't know exactly how much of that is slander or people trying to take him down. It seems as though that he actually has some outstanding issues with the local police. He's definitely travels in some very very unsavory circles in Romania, which I wouldn't necessarily hang out with those people. But I guess if you're Andrew Tate, that's probably fine. But yeah, it's not for me. I live like a very domestic life, and also at the other end of the country. It takes me literally 12 hours to drive to the vicinity of Andrew Tate, which for me is a comfortable distance. So yeah, that's pretty much my take on it.
It, in my opinion, I don't care about his who he gathers with. I do agree with many of his opinions on feminism and wokeism, but he, his main problem is the same as it is with all probably all the alt light people from the YouTube, like Paul Joseph Watson, I don't know, Steven Crowder, Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson. They're just individualists. And that's also probably the main problem with liberalism. Both of the liberalisms. Yeah, this is the question I forgot you to ask. The difference between there are so many libertarians here in Slovenia that they also call themselves classical liberals that think that there's nothing wrong with classical liberalism. That the only thing that is wrong is a so-called progressive or social liberalism that is basically a leftist ideology or whatever.
Yeah.
But you mentioned in an interview I wrote from you that they do have uh, similar problems when you come to the core of the ideologies. Would you please explain to our
Yeah.
audience what's the
Yeah, of
problem
course.
with classical liberal? That
I think classical liberalism has an issue that like the core of the issue that it has is their conception of freedom. They see, okay, there's a freedom from external constraint, be it the state or traditional bonds or things like that. People imposing their will, society imposing its will on you is a constraint, and the direction that we need to be traveling in is we need to unshackle ourselves from this. Don't want any coercion. Free from coercion. That's the direction it is. I think their conception of freedom is faulty because their conception of what it means to be an individual is faulty. Like I think I think it was Hegel who actually described this perspective on the individual, that it is impossible to have individuality without the balancing force of the other. You develop as an individual by not only comparison, but by kind of mirroring yourself off the other. And the other in this case is other individuals, other communities, your kin, the people around you. The concept of the individual as this atomized thing that just exists outside of everything else. This is wrong. And this is wrong if you are an embodied person and just travel through the world, and you just experience the world. You can sense this is wrong. And now what essentially post liberalism is the sense that this is wrong grown into an ideology, into a big, movement, because atomization is reality now. We've essentially played out the experiment of what it means to be like this man is an island type thing, and it is horrible. And we're now realizing, okay, why is this horrible? Because to build yourself as an individual, to actually realize the ideals of classical liberalism, you need the collective. You need to have the collective, to nourish the collective, to develop the individual, to provide the constraints. Like just like it's kind of like asking someone, paint me a picture, but he doesn't know what a picture is. He doesn't know what painting is. He has no brushes. He doesn't have any style that he knows about how to paint. So it's all kind of out. All of these tools would be provided by the system that is a constraint that shackles him in many ways. If you're painting, you're not drawing, you're not finger painting with your own feces. There's all many things that you're not doing when you're painting. It's a very limited set of things that you're doing, and these are all provided by a tradition. And it's the same with any sort of endeavor that people engage in. And the idea that you're just going to be individually going around life and being creative and authentic and having desires that spring forth out of nowhere, it's insane, because that's not where desires come from. That's not where creativity comes from. It's all a progression on the basis of a tradition that you understand and respect. And that's where even progress comes from. We're very suspicious of the word progress, but there is such a thing as progress. It's the next step, a considered next step in dialogue with a tradition. And that's what progress is. And if it's not considered, and if it's not in dialogue with a tradition, then it's not progress. So I mean, there are many things wrong with
No.
classical liberalism, but I think this is kind of the core of it for me.
Yeah, thank you for that. They're basically saying we want this uh, individual formed by traditional society, and if you have an individual formed by traditional society, then you can have individualism, and that's it. That's everything they're saying. No matter
Yeah.
what the changes are, no matter what the opponents are, the antagonists, they're just repeating the same and the same mantra once all over again. We just want this individual formed by traditional society. Yeah, but there's no traditional society anymore, or
Yeah, that
it's
works
at
for
least it's
exactly
struggling against
one
the.
generation. That works for one generation. You have all these individuals created by, and then you have your great libertarian society, 30, 50 years. That's it, done. Next generation's completely destroyed by the same great logic.
Yeah, I hope there's no Spinoza that comes and deconstructs the main tenets of traditional religion. I hope there's no, I don't know, Lenin. I hope there's no Marx. I hope there's no French Revolution. I hope there's no American Revolution. If none of that happens, then we're all okay. That's their message. Nothing deeper than that.
Yeah, but we're not okay, because all of those things have happened, and they're straight
Yeah.
in a straight line. Post John Stuart Mill. Just the next step logically is this idea of, oh, we have to unshackle our chains. Okay, let's unshackle them. In a violent outburst. So yeah, that's just how it goes. You can't just stop in your tracks.
Yeah, no, I lied. It's not their only argument. They have the second one. The second argument is this is not a true classical liberalism.
Oh, of
This is
course.
not how we imagine it.
Hmm. Of
Okay,
course.
what do you propose?
Yeah. I mean,
Okay,
if you,
Alex. Now,
yeah.
now, now.
No,
Yeah,
I was
go
just
on,
going to
go on.
say that if you clearly point out that today's classical liberalism is downstream from the old classical liberalism that they harken back to and say, no, this is a classical classical liberalism from like the 1700s. Well, you've proven in a causal chain that led to this. So if your rule led you to this, what good is your rule? So hopefully they will acknowledge that. Some will, some won't.
We tried our model. People got corrupted. Yeah. Okay. Uh, okay. Now we can really finish our stream with these thoughts. So thank you once again, Alex. I hope we can see each other in a month or two again for some other topics if you will be up to. Thanks for to all the viewers and daters, and yeah, that's it. God
That's it.
bless
Thank you
us
so much.
all, and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.